moving on, we're going to look at another iconic weapon of the Space Marines, which is the Power Sword. Now, when the power cell on the Power Sword is activated, the blade becomes sheathed in a lethal haze of disruptive energy. This energy field allows the blade to easily rip through armor and flesh alike.
So, is that everything? Really? That short?
It's essentially a sword with an energy field.
Alright, everyone. Dig in! Because I have figured out a working theory of not only how our power sword works, but how to build it. So a power sword works on one of two principles. One, it could use antimatter, which the sword itself still exists and is not destroyed by the field inside or around it, so it can't possibly use antimatter because this would not only annihilate the sword, but the user of the sword as well. Therefore, it must use plasma. But how is the plasma contained without magnetism? Well, we know that lightning bolts generate a small amount of plasma as they pass through the air. That is the effect that we actually see in a lightning bolt, is the air becoming plasma for a brief moment. And we know the plasma can be directed by electricity to go in certain directions. Therefore, it is in the power sword's description itself that tells us that it's using the following method. Showers of lightning-like bolts surrounding the blade. The power sword isn't magnetic. It does not stick to targets it strikes because of magnetism, but rather it's using electrical principles to take plasma to be a controlled electroplasma around a solid metal grounding core. Unlike normal plasma, say the Tau plasma rifle or the Imperial plasma gun, this plasma isn't significant, at least not in the way we would expect to define it. You see, while the weapon isn't striking a target, it is grounding itself around the entirety of the blade, which is equally distributing the plasma molecules, which are likely hydrogen because of the blue coloration of the power sword, regardless if a Chaos Space Marine wielder or a regular Space Marine is wielding it. Which means that it's likely taking hydrogen, heating it up to 501 degrees Celsius in order to achieve a semi-plasma-like state for the gas, and using the electricity to control the electrons of the hydrogen in order to keep it near the sword. The electrical current is fully free-formed except for it's grounded into the blade. And the hilt of the blade is a massive, non-conductive reckoning point to prevent the electricity from feeding back into the user. This is what makes lightning rods effective, as they shoot you hit the lightning rod and it goes into the ground because it wants to ground itself. That much said, when the plasma sword when the power sword, I call it a plasma sword, my bad, strikes, it causes the electrical current to create a new point of conductivity and seek out a new point to ground itself into, i.e. what you just hit, diverting all the plasma molecules to the point of impact, creating the massive plasma effect that is hotter than the sun itself at just that one point of impact. There are some drawbacks and downsides. First start, power consumption. Then again, we've already established via the blasts of the Hell gun that fires out with enough electricity for a small hydroelectric dam. We know the Imperium has somehow managed to solve the power problem. But let's just say you used a lithium-ion battery to charge this. It would probably, and I'm going to get to all the math and science very shortly, need a sledgehammer-sized lithium-ion battery to just power it for 1 minute. No. This is not battery-powered. These things are known to last for virtually ever. This is being powered by a miniature fission reactor. Note I said fission. You see, fusion reactions are something that you can't possibly scale down to the size of your hand because of the ever-expanding mass. No, a fission reaction can be made as small as a hand grenade, which you can easily wrap your hand around. So, what is the actual power output of a power sword? Well, we know it can cut through anything, but that's dependent upon the user's strength to continue to apply pressure so that the power field now diverts itself into the point and therefore brings all of the plasma to bear as the cutting source. In order for this to happen, it must reach a minimum temperature of 3,422 degrees Celsius, i.e. the melting point of tungsten. We also know that the speed at which the electricity travels is 298,792,458 meters per second, or roughly 1 million meters short of the speed of light. This means the power sword, with all of its science, must achieve a minimum fission reaction of 12.7 megawatt hours inside the hilt in order to deliver the cutting force necessary to cut through the toughest metal known to man. I did all of this work, by the way, with the help of the University of Delaware and my colleagues from my alumni, to figure out exactly how much electricity would be required to heat up tungsten to melt it, because we actually already know that. So, we then need to figure out what fissionable material must be placed within the sword and how much of that material exists in order to keep it powered. The oldest working power sword in the Imperium of Man is the Blade of Caliban of the Dark Angels, having been running for 8,244 years, or shortly before the beginning of the Great Crusade to unite all of mankind. Therefore, we need this sword to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for 8,244 years, which means it still has to be able to generate 12.7 megawatt hours charge for that entire time. To generate that base charge, you need a minimum of 8.86 kilograms of fissionable material. The math behind this, I will confess, is mostly from the University of Delaware, because you know what? This is literally nuclear physics. And we did have to use a converter available at the physics department library at the University of Delaware to figure out all of this information after we had done our math and double check everything. They still have to use a computer to help you figure all this out. That much said, there are several fissionable materials that can achieve 12.7 megawatt hours, but in order to achieve the size of the reactor we need and still last that long, there's only one. Tin-126. It generates enough gamma radiation to create a fission reaction, while at the same time having a half-life of 230,000 years. Which is how long we'll still be waiting for Half-Life 3. While at the same time, when under heat and stress, has one of the lowest radioactive hazards material in the universe, until you apply it to a fission reaction, at which point it generates so much gamma radiation that it's able to power entire nuclear power plants with just a small fragment. So, taking all this into account, measuring it all, and getting everything ready, wait for it. No, literally, wait for it, because mass is a form of weight. Okay, my puns are awful. But Tin-128 would need 12.2 kilograms to have enough power to still continue running at 12.7 megawatt hours after 8,244 years. And unlike Hellgun packs, which burn out quickly and we know for a fact are just gigantic glorified batteries, they aren't nuclear powered. This is. Therefore, the Imperium likely bases all of its power swords on Tin-126, an isotope of U-235, and Plutonium-239. This is why power swords never need to be sharpened. The blade isn't actually cutting, the power field is. I thought I would never ever be able to say this about Warhammer 40k, but using the air around it, preferably hydrogen atoms, an electrical current to excite and control what said atoms do, a fission core, and a non-conductive hilt and radioactive shielded crossguard, you could build a power sword that would weigh 22 kilograms, roughly the weight of 10 Scottish claymores, and with significant training, you could wield one in combat, and I just gave you the science to do it. Congratulations, Games Workshop. You made a weapon that makes sense, but not only that, I can science it into existence.
Now, before we continue, I know there's going to be at least one person in the comments who's going to point out, but what about the lightsaber style power sword that Eisenhorn has? No. Not going into that.
Okay, look. I could do the lightsaber or I could do the power sword that everyone else has. Your choice. So I decided to do the one that everyone else has. If you really want me to try to science the fuck out of an Imperial power sword that's actually a lightsaber, that'll be another episode.
Yeah. Speaking of plasma, though, next up we got the plasma gun. Now, the plasma gun fires highly energized balls of hydrogen-based plasma through a magnetic accelerator, which impacts upon the target, detonating with the power of a small sun. Now, these things are very prone to overheating and can actually kill the user if they're unlucky. And the hydrogen flasks that power these weapons have enough fuel to power it for 10 shots before needing to be replaced. Sadly, these flasks being replaced is a time-consuming and difficult process. But essentially, you've only got 10 shots and then you're done, essentially, unless you have enough time to actually refill the ammunition.
Okay. This one's simple, and so's the next one. And I hate to do this to all of you, but if you want to find out how plasma works, go look at the Tau episode. Seriously. You can control plasma using magnetic forces to create a magnetic field around it that will last as a magnetism charge long enough for the plasma to reach its destination or its maximum range, which is limited by how long the magnetic field can last before it dissipates, allowing the plasma to go in all directions into the air and simply stop being an electromagnetified plasma ball of fiery death. Put it simply, not only does this weapon work, it's something that we could be developing in the very near future, as at present we have managed to control and contain plasma inside of a magnetic reactor. Go look at the Tau Men-at-Arms episode if you really want to know how this works.
And I know a few of you are probably asking in the comments, hang on, you haven't covered the bolt gun yet. Well, we did cover the bolt weaponry in detail in the Imperial Guard episode in regards to the bolt pistol and the bolt gun. However, what we will look at today is the heavy bolter, which is, quite frankly, a gigantic version of the bolt gun, which fires powerful armor-piercing, fist-sized bolts at the enemy with a high rate of fire. These things are capable of absolutely destroying infantry and light vehicles alike. And because of the rate of fire, jamming is often the problem, and require regular maintenance regular maintenance outside of battle. Now, Fiaura, tell us how big the caliber of the ammunition that a heavy bolter is.
It's 1 caliber.
Yeah. Now, what's the biggest caliber bullet we have in rifles today?
95.
Was that .95, yeah?
Yeah.
And this is a 1.0 caliber.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big bullet.
It's a very big bullet. However, the way bolters are described as working, we've gone over this before, you cannot make a chemical-propelled projectile with a rocket/jet propulsion additional to the round and an explosive warhead that is still effective. You have to remember that explosive warheads have to be thin enough to prevent the explosive from being too contracted that it doesn't actually explode outwards, while at the same time the material still has to be thick enough and durable enough to withstand the rocket-propelled engines and not warp from the chemical propellant washing over it. Simply put, the way a bolt is described, and I have done research into metallurgy, actual rocket science, and bullet physics with professors, military personnel, and even a swordsmith, to draw the following conclusion: bolters simply cannot work the way they are described by Games Workshop. Go check out the Imperial Guard episodes if you want to find out why. Because I would literally be sitting here repeating myself like a broken record to describe all the science to you.
Now, moving away from weapons for a bit, we're going to take a look at one of the most interesting pieces of Space Marine war gear, the jump pack. Now, it's important to note that the jump pack is not a jetpack. It doesn't allow the user to fly. Now, while it does contain turbines or jets powerful enough to lift a Space Marine in power armor off the ground, It is used mainly for jumping, hence why it's called a jump pack. And it's basically used to make bounding leaps over obstructions to launch themselves at the enemy into melee combat.
Okay, we have jetpacks. They kind of work. They require a shitload of fuel. So how does a jump pack work? What is the insane amount of thrust, and how does it actually, and is it actually possible? Well, for this, we're going to have to do science. Actual rocket science! Yes, I'm literally doing actual rocket science. So, using the Dawn of War games and the Space Marine video game to determine just how much rocketry is involved to lift a 1 kiloton Space Marine up into the air, I measured all of them. And then came out that the Space Marine game was actually the fastest and highest jumping, and therefore the one I was going to use as the most likely candidate for determining what is required for a jump pack to function. So, Titus takes 121 frames at 60 frames per second to reach the pinnacle height his jump pack is capable of delivering to him. This means it takes just over 2 seconds to reach a height of roughly 46 feet. I measured this because we know how tall Captain Titus is at 8.1 feet tall. So, by measuring how many Captain Tituses he is actually off the ground, I'm able to then determine how high up in the air he went. Yes, I'm using a video game for a representation of what a jump pack is capable of, because it gives me a measurable video representation that I can use. Yes, I have looked at every single Warhammer 40k game that has the jump pack animation in it that is available to me. This includes Dawn of War 1, 2, and 3. And using this determination, I determined Space Marine was the fastest and highest jumping candidate. Now, all of that said, if you want to bitch at me about it in the comments, go right ahead, but I would be a dumb scientist to ignore an audio-visual representation of the actual effect I'm studying. At 46 feet, we reach 15.1 meters, which means he has to be traveling at 7.55 meters per second in order to reach the height. Now, for the actual rocket science, we need to determine pounds of thrust. Pounds of thrust is determined by the object being lifted times Earth's gravity and the amount of speed that is needed to be achieved to break it to its maximum height. So what you effectively have is pounds of thrust over the weight of the Space Marine with a jump pack, 1,100 kilograms, times the speed he's moving at, 7.55 meters plus 9.8 meters per second squared, equals 19,085 newtons, or divided by 4.545 in order to determine pounds of thrust. You require 4,289 pounds of thrust in order to lift the Space Marine off, assuming he's carrying 0 fuel. And considering the size of the jump pack, I'm assuming they've come up with some sort of super fuel that I've never heard of. But at the end of the day, that is exactly how many pounds of thrust is required to get him to go 46 feet in the air and come back down to Earth. Hello everyone, we just did actual rocket science.
We did indeed. Well, you did, but anyway. So how does actually viable would this actually be into getting a Space Marine into the thick of a melee combat?
So, considering you weigh 1,100 kilograms with the jump pack on, because the jump pack supposedly weighs 100 kilograms and the Space Marine weighs 1 metric ton, you would literally be able to drop an 1,100 kilogram kinetic bomb onto your enemies as you jump into melee combat. And assuming that your servos and everything and every form of impact compensation in the power armor could absorb the 46 feet you just fell, you would be delivering 1,100 kilograms at roughly 2.7 meters per second. To illustrate this, we have 2.7. You would be delivering 2,970 newtons of force into the ground, which is more than enough to crush, as we went over in a previous episode, the amount of forces required to crush a human skull. That's more than enough to crush a human skull. You were
Now imagine
literally landing on them with the force of a Mack truck traveling at 22 miles per hour.
Now imagine that, with all the weight behind it, and the thing that hits the ground first would be a power fist.
You would therefore be delivering... Holy shit. Assuming now that you could swing the fist in exact timing so that it is your point of impact. That is to say, it is the point at which you actually hit the ground with your entire body weight and the power of the power fist behind it, traveling at an additional 2.7 meters per second. Or if you were just going to slam the jump pack, you would therefore be traveling at an additional 9.8 meters per second, achieving terminal velocity almost instantaneously. By the way, you're probably going to kill yourself to do this, because I know of no way to compensate for the impact you were about to receive due to equal and opposite reaction forces.
Regardless, what a way to go.
Yes, you just asked a question, and now I want to know the answer. So assuming that you're doing that times 42 plus 9.8. Actually, no, you're actually traveling faster than terminal velocity because you're being propelled. My mistake. You're being propelled by that many pounds of force, and you're already traveling. This is already traveling at 42 meters per second. You are delivering a force of 432,305.4 newtons, or roughly half the force of the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki.
So basically, power fist plus jump pack equals a small nuke.
Or lots of red pulpish mist flying up into the air. Including your own, by the way, because equal and opposite reaction means that you're going to suffer the same effect.
But still, going out and battle like that will be one way. That'll be entered in the chapters, Hall of Records and Honor for all eternity.
Fair point.
Because it's just so epic. And speaking of epic, the Terminator Assault Cannon. Now, the Assault Cannon is essentially a medium caliber rotary autocannon with 6 barrels cycled with an electric motor past a single chamber. It fires ammunition, which is a cased round comprising a dense metallic core covered in a non-metallic composite sheath with a damantine tip. These things get extremely hot, even though the barrels are made of a heat-dispersing ceramic metallic alloy. They still generate temperatures of over 300 degrees. And because this is written by Games Workshop, I'm assuming that means 300 degrees Celsius.
Nope, Fahrenheit.
Oh, is it Fahrenheit? Okay, my mistake. The problem is these things are prone to jamming, and they generate an insane amount of kickback and recoil, which means it's impossible to have a normal person use these. However, these are normally used by Terminators, which have powerful servos, recoil compensators, and stabilizers built into the armor. And because they fire at such a high rate, ammunition is generally quickly exhausted. However, this drawback is negated in vehicle and dreadnought mountings where ammunition storage capacity is far greater.
This literally and figuratively is a 20mm minigun. There's no really need to science it, it already exists. Sincerely, Fiaura. Good job, Games Workshop, on actually creating a weapon that exists and making it sci-fi for me without having to check out the real-world Wait. Hundreds of rounds per second? 300 degrees Fahrenheit? Games Workshop, your assault cannon makes no goddamn sense. A modern minigun of the 20mm caliber fires 2,600 rounds per minute and delivers that's 43 rounds per second and reaches temperatures of 572 degrees of Fahrenheit before stopping the barrels from firing in order to avoid damaging the weapon or setting off the ammo. It is not prone to jams or problems, as a jam is simply ejected and the next barrel moved into place. How did the Imperium fuck this up so bad?
Someone lost the STC, it seems.
20mm caseless ammo, by the way, in a modern ammo box still has only 126 rounds of capacity for a box the size of a backpack. How could you not realize there's no way your assault cannon could fire that many shots and achieve a cooler temperature than a modern minigun and still jam and cause problems that a modern minigun doesn't have? I'm at a complete loss. I consulted an actual firearms expert who has shot a minigun before. Actually, I have to go out to the range and actually watch him do it. Yeah! No! No!
So essentially, the modern version is actually better than the futuristic version.
So much better than the futuristic version. I cannot even begin to describe it to you other than telling you that their version of an assault cannon makes it no better than just having a regular 30 caliber machine gun with armor-piercing rounds.
That's kind of disappointing. So hopefully, the Space Marines can win some honor back with the final weapon we'll be looking at today. The Cyclone Missile Launcher. Now, the Cyclone Missile Launcher is a missile launcher, surprisingly enough, designed to be fitted onto Terminator armour. It consists of two cube-shaped missile boxes that are twin-linked with a targeter and sensor array. The missile and sensor unit is fixed onto the back of the standard Terminator armour, allowing the Space Marine to use a Stormbolter and Power Fist with the Cyclone. However, older designs of the Cyclone Missile Launcher had the sensor array hand-carried. Now, this took away the option of a Power Fist, but made the weapon more accurate.
Okay. Win back some honor, you say. Well, this isn't even a futuristic weapon. We literally have this weapon today. This is just a smaller, scaled-down version of an MLRS. Actually studying the miniatures and actually studying the lore, not only is it a futuristic version of the MLRS weapon system, i.e. that is multi-rocket launch system. You saw these during Operation Desert Storm, firing cruise missiles as well as being able to fire bomblet missiles that were used from bombardment. It's even the same caliber as the bomblet missile at 33mm rockets. This is an actual existing weapon system. It's just a smaller version made for power armor. Which if we had Terminator armor today, I would be willing to bet we would stick an MLRS on it because it provides them with instantaneous direct artillery fire support. I have done all of the lore and research on this one, and unlike the assault cannon, which I am royally pissed about, this actually works and functions like it says it does.
So when you combine the entire package of Terminator armor, Stormbolter, Power Fist, and the Cyclone, how does it hold up as a comprehensive package?
It's nice. It's great in terms of armor and firepower. You have no mobility, and more importantly, vision is so restricted that I wonder how you can actually aim the Cyclone missile launcher accurately without accidentally potentially hitting one of your friends or completely missing a target that was only 10 degrees off to your right.
I suppose in that case, the older models with the sensor array carried in hand will probably be a better option.
The sensor array carried in hand would be the better option because you could point and direct it that way. More importantly, I imagine the older model sensor array actually had a 360-degree sensor.
Yes.
In addition to all of this, the limited ammunition the Terminators can actually carry and the vulnerability of their backs make them not the most ideal infantry, because as soon as they get into a urban fighting situation, getting shot in the back is easily going to kill one of them. More importantly, the loss of a Terminator is the loss of a massive amount of firepower. If something can actually penetrate its armor, then you have a problem. Because that is a lot of investment into one guy.
That being said, if you have an enemy artillery line with a whole bunch of heavy artillery, and you get a squad of these guys, armed with Cyclones, teleporting behind enemy lines and just launching off them missiles into the artillery, that can be very, very, disruptive of the enemy's plans.
Very, very disruptive. Until they get them pinned down via fire and can outflank the Terminators. Once Once you're outside of their frontal field of vision, Terminator can't actually... He doesn't even know you're there. He can't turn his head to see you. And therefore, so long as you avoid making any obvious noises, you can walk right up behind a Terminator. He would never even know you're there and place a bomb on his back, destroying his power plant and engine and making him just sit there in an inert power armor, unable to move. And considering how slow they are, once they get into melee combat, if their first strike with that power fist doesn't hit the target, you can easily outflank and outmaneuver them in melee combat and strike them in the back. Sorry.
Okay, so that wraps up this edition of Men at Arms. Out of everyone we covered so far, where do the Space Marines rank?
You want me to rank them now? Let's see. I would say the Space Marines probably rank up with the Orcs, oddly enough.
Really now?
Most of their weapons check out via science, and their primary form of armor actually works according to how it says it works, just I wish we could build it.
Yeah.
Not to mention, I was pleasantly surprised to be able to describe exactly how a power sword works and functions.
Which is always a nice little touch when we can actually find something we can actually potentially make in real life today. So anyway, next time, when you check us out on Men at Arms, we're going to be looking at the weapons and armor of the Necrons. I know a few people will be interested in that, and some people probably will go thinking, oh no, they're going to rip into them and get a field, force field, whatever. But we'll get into that at another time, so hold your horses. Anyway, this has been Remleiz.
And this has been Fiaura.
And we'll see you all again next time.
See you then! Bye!